coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
The American people have lost faith in President Bush's course of action in Iraq, and they are demanding a new direction.
Promise of withdrawal of our forces, regardless of the consequences, would constitute a failure of political and moral leadership.
I continue to believe that the original decision to go into Iraq was a massive strategic blunder.
Landung in Camp Marez, der wichtigsten US-Basis in Mossul. Mossul liegt ca. 350 Kilometer nordwestlich der Hauptstadt von Bagdad, am rechten Ufer des Tigris, gegenüber der historischen Ruine von Ninive, einst Zentrum des Assyrerreichs. Mossul ist nach Bagdad und Basra die drittgrößte Stadt des Irak und ist der wichtigste Verkehrsknotenpunkt im Norden des Landes. Die Universitätsstadt, die einst Perle des Nordens genannt wurde, beherbergt ein buntes Völkergemisch. Die Mehrheit stellen Kurden, daneben gibt es eine große Minderheit arabischsprachiger assyrischer Christen und eine kleinere Minderheit der Turkmenen. Die Ölfelder nördlich und östlich der Stadt zählen zu den wichtigsten im Irak. All dies, die ethnische Durchmischung, die Lage als Verkehrsknotenpunkt und die Öllagerstätten in der Umgebung, machen die Stadt im neuen Irak zu einem Pulverfass. Heute zählt Mossul zu den wichtigsten Hochburgen von Al-Qaida. Immer wieder gibt es schwere Kämpfe mit der US-Armee und neuerdings auch immer mehr mit den irakischen Truppen. Im Interview erläutert Major Robert Molinari die Situation in Mossul.
What we're seeing here in Mosul is successful operations due to increased amount of Iraqi security forces in the city. And what we're really fighting against here in Mosul is a high unemployment rate and a disenfranchised majority of people who are turning to the insurgents because that is the only way that they are provided with fundamental things they need to exist. What we're seeing is success in that through expansion of Iraqi security forces throughout the city so that they can live in amongst the population and become familiar to the population, and over time when the population's trust, so that the population will reject the insurgents, and at the same time working with the local governance to increase increase employment opportunities, to increase vocational training, to increase essential services, and rebuild the legitimacy and the support for the government that you see here in the city. And in the time that we've had here in Mosul and in Inner Province, we're seeing substantial improvements to both freedom of movement for the local people on their own streets and roads due to decrease in IEDs, and thus an increase in commerce and a slow increase in economic improvement. Iraqi security forces have had a great deal of success in southern Iraq, in Anbar province, in Baghdad, and Diyala. The insurgents are attracted to urban populations where they can hide in the open, where they can enhance in sectarian or ethnic tensions. So they'll go to wherever security forces are not. I can't say it's the last stronghold. They will simply go to places where the population will support them because the population doesn't feel they're secure, the population doesn't have the essential services. So as we continue to build capability in the Iraqi government and military systems in the Iraqi security forces, the insurgents will have less opportunity to go places. Mosul is in a clear phase right now. Mosul is in a phase where we're building new traffic control points, new combat outposts, new bases to put the Iraqi security forces in and live amongst the population. We've been doing that for about 3 to 4 months now, and we'll continue doing that through the summer. These new positions allow the Iraqi security forces to live amongst the population. That clearance phase is going to go through about midsummer, and then after that, the most important thing you do is stay there. Don't leave it.
Ein Trupp von US-Soldaten inspiziert eine Basis der irakischen Armee. Vor einiger Zeit ließ Al-Qaida hier eine gewaltige Autobombe hochgehen. Der irakische Offizier hat die Aufgabe, die Basis wiederherzustellen und ist dabei auf die Hilfe der US-Amerikaner angewiesen. Der US-Offizier scheint nicht beeindruckt zu sein von dem, was er sieht.
أدري هذه الراد بالسنة يلا خلصوا. I need 1 year to clean all these trashes. بيعرض in all that trash. بس الطالب إحنا بس الطالب. Just the little stuff, the big stuff. بسيطة يا شغلة البطالة سهلة. What's that? He said, okay, I'm gonna pick all this. Yeah, that's the big thing. The engineers will come out here.
Doch Hauptmann Foreman sagt Hilfe zu.
Yeah, we'll get you help. What else do you need besides these HESCOs? Where do you want the C-wire strands?
شو يحتاج بعد غير هذا اليسكو غير هذا؟ هو بس محتاج اليسكوات ولا السلاح. صبات ما حد يجي ما يجي. Just the HESCO and the T-wire on this.
Well, where does he want the T-wire? On top?
Yeah, on the top.
Okay.
He said, can you put the double T-wire, one on top and another?
You want 2 strands of T-wire on top?
Yeah. مولد مال كهرباء ما عندي. Generator. He said, can you bring to me?
A generator.
Yeah.
City power no good?
الكهرباء الوطنية. ماكو وطني. No city power. هاي مخلفات الانفجار.
Okay.
It's broken all of it. عادي خلصنا فيها
Als nächstes besuchen Foremans Soldaten einen Außenposten der irakischen Armee. Auch hier sind die Amerikaner unzufrieden mit den Leistungen der irakischen Soldaten. Die Zeit drängt. Die Position der irakischen Armee in der Stadt muss rasch verbessert werden. Denn im Moment diskutieren amerikanische Generäle mit ihren irakischen Kollegen über eine Offensive, die in Mosul durchgeführt werden soll.
موجودة فوق نفق الصحة الشغل نفق الصحة اللي هنا بالضبط، وعندي مرابطة أيضا يمين بانزيخانة رأس نفق الصحة بالضبط على مسافة 200 متر عنها، والمرابطة الأخرى تقع.
Ich interviewe General Herbert McMaster. McMaster, ein kritischer Geist und enger Vertrauter von General Petraeus, gilt als einer der Köpfe hinter der neuen US-Strategie im Irak.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to understand about Iraq is that the fight is different. You know, the effort to bring security and stability is different in every area of Iraq. And so the conflict changes, you know, based on location, but it also evolves over time. So what's really important is to pay particular attention to the unique ethnic, sectarian, tribal dynamics, the nature of the enemy in certain areas that make each of these areas unique, and not to try to apply one sort of set solution across all of Iraq, because the situation is fundamentally different based on location. In Mosul, the enemy there is Al-Qaeda in Iraq and other organizations that have allied themselves with Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Ansar al-Sunnah is one of those organizations. So what does it work in Nineveh province is this sort of alliance of convenience between these takfirists, these Salafi jihadists who are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and some former Baathists and former members of the old regime who try to draw on a reservoir of discontent and a reservoir of fear associated with what their place will be in the new order. They feel as if their world has been turned upside down. They were the leaders in the old regime, and now they're in a relatively weak position. They feel. They're also very concerned about the encroachment of the Kurds from the north, and so really what Al-Qaeda needs is they need a certain portion of the population to regard them as patrons and protectors, and then they come in and say, "We will protect you from, fill in the blank, either the Crusaders, the rejectionists, and what the word they use for the Shia community, or the Kurds." But once invited in to these communities, what they do is extend their control with brutality, with intimidation, with murder. And over time, what has occurred in many of these areas, Mosul included, is that people have realized that the future under Al-Qaeda, the future under these insurgent organizations affiliated with Al-Qaeda is very bleak. And so our security efforts aim to lift the pall of fear off these communities so that normalcy can return, hope can be rekindled, and then people can understand, that they can advance their interests within the political system rather than at the end of the gun. And I think that this is what is occurring broadly throughout the country, in Mosul in particular. Now, Al-Qaeda is drawn to Mosul because of the ethnic and to some extent the sectarian dynamics there. You have a divide, for example, between the Turkmen, Sunni, and Shia communities. It's the perfect place for Al-Qaeda to pursue their strategy of trying to start a civil war, because Al-Qaeda can only survive if Iraqis are fighting each other, because that's the only way they can gain sponsorship within a portion of the population. And so the strategy that they've been pursuing since the end of 2003 is set conditions for a civil war, get a cycle of ethnic and sectarian violence going, so then you can use that chaos to establish control over certain areas, use then those areas to conduct mass murder attacks and other sort of means of inciting sectarian violence, and then continue to create a chaotic environment. And of course, the Iraqi people suffer tremendously from this. Yeah, that's just a very dramatic change. Okay, now, hard job in these areas. These areas were used by Al-Qaeda as safe havens and support bases for mass murder attacks against innocent civilians in Baghdad. And the reason why they were drawn there are many. I mean, first of all, it's a rural area, so you just have to behead a couple of people, in these areas, and everybody gets the idea: don't inform on Al-Qaeda, don't talk to coalition, don't talk to Iraqi security forces. And so these are areas where they could assemble their bombs, assemble their car bombs, and then use them in Rasaf in particular, but against the Shia communities, but in other areas within Baghdad as well. Al-Qaeda was able to gain sponsorship there because of this brutality and intimidation. And it was the heart of sort of Saddam's military-industrial complex as well. So this was an area that was a big loser economically and politically with the collapse of the Ba'athist regime in 2003. And so this is what Al-Qaeda used to gain some sponsorship here. And the strategy for dominating Baghdad by the 1920s Revolution Group and all these other groups that are affiliated with Al-Qaeda in Iraq was to dominate what are called the Baghdad belts, the approaches to Baghdad, and then gain access into Baghdad's neighborhoods and foment the kind of sectarian violence that you saw in 2005 and 2006. So these belt areas were very important to the enemy. This is an old strategy of Saddam's. I mean, Saddam repopulated this area with mainly Sunni Arabs after the 1991 uprising. When you talk about Al-Qaeda, you're talking about people who are committed to an un-Islamic, and narrow definition of religion that basically is kutubist in its origins, that is based on a definition of what a true Muslim is, that is very it excludes the vast majority of Muslims, almost all of them, and they believe that anyone who does not adhere to their narrow and really irreligious definition is an apostate, an unbeliever, a rejectionist, and that it is their duty to kill them. I mean, this is the sort of takfirist dimension of this, the ability to declare people as unbelievers and then kill them. So those are the most committed people who are essentially brainwashed, who are manipulating, undereducated, largely illiterate young males, to use them in this very brutal campaign of mass murder and coercion. And what happened is in the period 2003, late 2003 and on, a series of alliances of convenience were made between nationalist, Ba'athist, so-called resistance movements and Al-Qaeda. That has fractured. I mean, the people have seen Al-Qaeda's true colors. They understand their true intentions, and they have rejected it. And it will depend, obviously, in large measure, on the Iraqi government's and leaders within the Iraqi government's ability to suppress their own fears, because all of these communities have fears that drive the violence. And among the Shia leadership, whose families suffered, almost unspeakable, trauma under Saddam, they fear a Ba'athist resurgence. I mean, they feel as if they were colonized, for centuries underneath a Sunni Arab minority, and now is their chance to really assume the position of leadership. As you recall, in 2005, they boycotted the elections. That was disastrous for the Sunni community because they're underrepresented at the provincial level. This is the time of the provincial elections, and within district governments and so forth. And they are determined to participate fully in the next election. And that's the definition of success. If you move the competition from a physical battleground, a competition that is decided at the end of an AK-47 to the political domain, then that's success.
Sergeant Williams ist der Kommandant eines M1 Kampfpanzers. Mit seinem 62 Tonnen schweren Ungetüm fährt er entlang der von den Amerikanern Route Santa Fe genannten Straße zu seinem Beobachtungsposten. Er stellt den Panzer mitten auf der Straße ab und wartet für die nächsten paar Stunden. Was das bringen soll, frage ich Sergeant Williams. Erstens, sagt Williams, geht es darum, Präsenz zu zeigen. Die Widerständler wissen, dass sie kaum eine Chance haben, eine Bombe entlang der Straße zu platzieren, solange der Panzer sich dort befindet. Sergeant Williams sucht ständig mit der Beobachtungskamera das Gebiet entlang der Straße ab. Eine Wärmebildkamera liefert zusätzliche Bilder. Durch diese Darstellung erscheint die Kontur eines Menschen auf dem Bildschirm als heller Fleck. So kann sich niemand unentdeckt der Straße nähern, auch nicht in der Nacht, sagt Williams. Seit die Panzer hier regelmäßig Posten beziehen, ist die Anzahl der Anschläge an der Route Santa Fe dramatisch zurückgegangen. Doch auch die Tatsache, dass es hier nun sicherer ist, kann nicht darüber hinwegtäuschen, dass entlang der Straße Route Santa Fe die meisten der Häuser schwer beschädigt sind. Den ganzen Sommer über und in den Herbst hinein will die US-Armee gemeinsam mit irakischen Truppen Al-Qaida in Bedrängnis bringen. Es ist hier wie im Wilden Westen. Die Amerikaner haben die Stadt mit einem Netz aus Forts, Außenposten und Basen überzogen, die nahe genug beieinander liegen, sodass im Falle eines Anschlags eine Truppe der anderen helfen kann. Doch die Bewohner von Mosul, der Perle des Nordens, werden wohl noch eine gute Zeit darauf warten müssen, dass ein wenig Normalität in ihre idyllische Stadt am Ufer des Tigris Einzug hält.